Oh, sweet. Hello, everybody. I'm Charles Miller. I'll be your moderator for this panel. Welcome to the Student Games Festival 2020 recruitment panel. We'll be talking about ways to get hired in the industry. And joining me are three lovely guests, our panelists. Um, to start us off, would you like to go around and introduce yourselves? Your name, where you work, what you do, and just for fun, like your favorite video game? Do you want to start us off, Maria, and then work to the right there?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Maria. I am the HR manager and head of recruiting at Unbroken Studios. And my favorite video game has to be a tie between the Witcher series and the Guild Wars series. I have a couple hundred hours in each, so I can't pick.
Nice. Solid picks. How about you, Hector?
Yeah, hey guys, this is Hector. Sorry, I don't have a webcam, so it'll just be mic only for today. I'm a university recruiter at Blizzard Entertainment, and mainly I focus on most of the game engineering, analytics, and business operations roles. My favorite game, well, most recently definitely has to be Animal Crossing. That's pretty much all I've been playing right now. So right before our call, I was collecting wood to try to meet my daily goal. So
So
Hi,
classic, very topical. Yeah.
everybody. My name is Marissa. I also am at Blizzard as an associate university recruiter. I generally focus on helping our undergraduates find, software engineering opportunities, supporting our BattleNet online products division. And currently, right now, I've actually gotten our Nintendo 64 out. So we've been playing a lot of Mario Kart 64, and that's been keeping us pretty busy.
Nice, nice. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming out. The format of this panel will be I'll be fielding some questions, and then about halfway through, I'm going to use some questions that have been posted to the Discord, and I'll also be checking out the Twitch chat so you can do kind of a Q&A with these folks. Also, as I post these questions, and you guys can jump in and out, it's kind of a casual format. Don't worry about being too rigid. And let's get into it. For our first question, I'm actually kind of interested. What is the perspective from the hiring manager about accepting new hires, entry level positions? What do you do? What do you guys do as part of your process for accepting applications?
who would you like to start, Charles?
Oh, anybody, go for it. Have
Okay,
fun.
well, I guess since I asked, hey guys, this is Hector again. Well, overall at Blizzard, specifically for interns and new grads, and I did want to clarify the distinction between the two. Interns are mainly for returning students, and new grads are for those students who are on the verge of graduating or will be graduating very soon or have recently graduated. So those are really the two areas of young talent that Blizzard looks for. So typically, year over year, a couple months after the summer interns go home, so I would say around September, August, September, a call usually goes out to all of our hiring managers and the executives at Blizzard, and they essentially tell us which interns they have room to hire for that following summer. And you can imagine that Blizzard being a gaming company, we do typically year over year hire a lot of design and engineering interns across the business. However, I don't want to discount an area that Marissa currently is very involved in, which is our Battle.net Online platforms team. They are essentially the large tech organization at Blizzard, and I think she can talk a little bit more about that as we go on. But typically, that's how the timeline works for us. The call goes out after summer, and we hire them, and our executives are very much on board with interns because without young talent, we can never grow the correct talent that we need into the Blizzard ecosystem.
Nice, thank you. How about for Unbroken Studios, Maria?
Yeah, so one cool thing about Unbroken Studios is we're a small studio, which means oftentimes our hiring needs can be extremely flexible. So maybe we consider bringing on one mid-level person or two kind of more junior people, and sometimes we're considering people on a spectrum. So sometimes the opportunities come from maybe I've posted a job that says animator, but I'm looking at animators on a range of experience levels. So that's where a lot of our opportunities come from. Of course, we have a lot of QA opportunities, and then we do on occasion have junior specific opportunities that are open for design or anything like that.
Sounds good. Sounds good. So it sounds like there's a lot of different departments, but it sounds like there was a focus for technical opportunities at Blizzard at least. Would you guys feel like that there's certain fields that are there have more opportunities for students, like certain departments, like engineering or art, rather than others? And what would you say would be the most hot for people looking for entry level positions?
This is Marissa speaking, and I think I can jump in. In regards to Blizzard, I would say probably right now, one of the larger areas and departments that's growing is going to be, the engineering field, just because there are so many different ways that students can contribute, whether it's in web, mobile, platform applications. So it's a pretty large field for computer science students to jump into from an engineering perspective. But we do still have, a couple opportunities on the team as well directly. Hector, I don't know if you want to speak a little bit to those, since I know you have some experience working with those teams.
Yeah, of course. So, with regard to the various game teams, whether it be Overwatch, World of Warcraft, Hearthstone, Team One, which now manages all of our classic games as well, majority of our openings are on the engineering front. However, I would say it's a little bit tougher to make it onto a game team because the roles are a little bit more niche, right? If you apply for a typical engineering role in Marissa's organization, somewhere on BattleNet, your typical full stack developer or front end or maybe just a back end developer can very likely find a home. So the BattleNet team at Blizzard and the IT team, they function very much like any other large tech company within FANG, right? Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, or Google. Those organizations and pipelines are built out exactly the same. However, when you go into the gaming side of the house, it's a little bit more niche, as I mentioned earlier. So you have gameplay engineering, you have graphics engineering, you have physics engineering, and then when you talk about the game design side, you're talking about quest design, character design, hero design. So it becomes a little bit more niche. And so I would say those students who have a very specific set of skills that's directly targeted toward a specific type of role, that's where you want to go toward. But I think your general CS student who loves computer science and perhaps has built a server here and built a platform there and maybe an app here, I would say somewhere in the tech organization would definitely be a good place to call home.
Nice, thank you.
I would definitely add to that is generally the roles that are hardest to outsource are the ones that tend to be more in-house and therefore have the most opportunities, I think, on the starting end. I mean, that's not exactly the same for every single role, but for the most part, like for example, concept art is very frequently outsourced. Therefore, it's very difficult to find an in-house position for concept, especially on the entry level end.
Alrighty. So in-house positions also people should focus on their specific sort of like specialization among design or whatever role they're looking for. And engineering students and that sort of CS focus can transition across teams, which gives them a lot of opportunities. If I was to summarize it there. Also, to differentiate yourselves, it seems like getting a job in the games industry is fairly competitive, and an easy way to differentiate yourself from other applicants is through your cover letter. Do you have any? What do you look for in a cover letter as a recruiter that would make a person seem like a good fit for your team or your company?
I can take this one. One thing that really stands out to me when a candidate reaches out to me is when they've done the research, because it means that they're actually taking the time to put in the effort into their application. So, my studio is small. We don't have a ton in the way of public information, but when there is the kind of personal touch of saying, "Hey, I checked out your game," or "Hey, I saw your website and I saw this thing on it, and I thought it was really cool." I really appreciate that because I feel like there's a genuine level of connection there.
All right. How about
Yeah,
at Blizzard? Yeah.
Yeah, I would totally echo what Maria said. The cover letter is a way for you to give us a little bit of context to who you are, right? Your resume is going to tell us your whole work history, the projects you've worked on. That's cool. You're kind of checking the boxes on that. But a cover letter gives us a story of you. And at Blizzard, that's very important. I know that, previously at some other organizations I've worked for, cover letters, no one reads them. No one really cares for them. And then when I got to Blizzard, it was a little bit of a culture shock as a recruiter because we do. And so, with the fact that Blizzard being the brand it is, we get a lot of applicants for a lot of roles. And so, a cover letter is a way for us to help differentiate a candidate who is passionate and one that is just there to check the boxes. So, a cover letter is definitely very important.
Okay, so it seems like the difference between the resume and the cover letter is that the resume is more focused on the checking the boxes, skills, and prerequisites from work experience, but the cover letter is more about the essence of who that person is and how they would fit onto the team, culturally and interest-wise. Does that seem correct?
Yeah.
All
Yep,
right.
that's on the ball.
Wonderful. Moving on then, where would you suggest that people do this research for a company? Would it be through those like online websites and whatnot? What are some key points of information that a person should research for that cover letter?
One thing that I always sorry, didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah,
Um,
go for it.
One thing I always try to look for when I'm researching another potential company is their funding source. So this can actually drastically affect the way they do business, their business priorities, and kind of the way that they really run things. And so, let's say there's websites like Niche and Crunchbase. There's a couple of different websites like that. And even the smallest companies that no one's ever heard of are often listed there because usually someone wants to know, where several $1 million went, right?
Yeah.
So, so usually you can find that information online, and that can help to give you a picture of what is this business's priorities and maybe what kind of timeline are they hiring on? Are they publicly traded or are they privately traded, and how does that affect the work that they do? That's one really big part for me.
That's fascinating, honestly. Thank you.
Mhm.
Hector and Marissa, would you have anything to input on that?
Yeah, I think another great place for, students to start when they're doing their job searches, really just, take a look at the actual description just to try and get a better understanding of the team, what they're trying to accomplish, what requirements they have. Look at, what languages will they be using? Do you have any previous projects that you've worked on in the past that maybe are relevant to what they're looking for? And then as far as, the company culture and doing research on that front, you have a lot of great resources you can utilize, like LinkedIn. If a company is very active on LinkedIn, you can learn a lot by their posts. Are they responding to comments? What do those responses look like? You can also do a lot of research on, their Instagram. A lot of companies will have just specialized Instagrams to really focus on a company's culture, where you can learn a little bit more about specific teams and individuals. So I think those are two really great outlets that students can easily utilize and reference when tailoring that cover letter for a specific.
Sounds good. Thank you. Thank you. It seems like it's better to do more work than less for researching and fine tuning your specific resume or cover letter to a company and the position at that company. But it can also be difficult to find a lot of time to do that during the school year. What would you say would be like the best sort of cost benefit analysis of fine tuning, but not spending a huge amount of time on the details for an application? What would be your, like, top 3 things to prioritize?
This is Hector. I guess I can start off with this one. I would say definitely prioritize your education. You are in school, you're probably paying a heck of a lot of money, whether you're at design school, art school, at USC, at Cal Poly, doesn't matter where you are, focus on that first. Because I think with a good education, you'll begin to meet the right people even just through that by joining clubs and organizations like SGDA, right? And then secondly, I would say definitely prioritize your projects because I totally get it. Sometimes you are very much focused on your classes and you may not have the time necessarily to land every internship out there, right? The gaming industry is very small and there's only so many companies out there and there's so many students out there. So there's no way that every single student will get hired. So definitely focus on your projects. And then thirdly, utilize those projects that you're working on to build out the cover letter and resume. And don't get too hung up on the format of that stuff. Just find a good template you like. For example, I tell every candidate if you are totally stuck and you don't know what to do, your career services center will usually always have templates for you. And if you think those templates suck, then just look up, Harvard Business School resume template and just use that. Honestly, that's what I base mine off of. And that's a very good way to look at how a professional does it. And you can just tailor it that way. But yeah, don't get hung up too much on the template though.
Nice, thank you. Um, I guess, to kinda swing around to another sort of topic, you were talking about at Blizzard, you had sort of a life cycle, production cycle for when you would start hiring and how it would start in the summer, how would a person research and utilize knowing that hiring cycle to better their chances for applying at a company?
Yeah, Marissa, did you want to take that one?
Yeah, yep, I could take that one. So what's nice about Blizzard is we have, at the same application cycle and format every year, which is great because it does allow students to understand when we're going to be posting those applications and when they should be preparing their resume and cover letter. So typically we'll have these positions posted and available starting in the fall, sometime between, I would say, August and September. So hopefully over the summer, this can give all of the students a great chance to start working on their cover letter, start crafting together their resumes so they can be a part of that initial wave of applicants when we finally do make these positions available. From there, what Blizzard does is then we will start interviewing and reaching out to candidates for about 2 months while they're applying. And then for the most part, we have all of our interns hired, I would say, by February and March of the following year.
Yeah, I would to that. I would say probably a lot of companies that don't necessarily have a kind of a pattern of recruiting like Blizzard does is if they've announced a game, they've probably got roles either like ready to go or they're about to come out because a lot of the more entry level roles tend to be hired towards the later parts of development. And those roles also end up having to be roughly around the time that the marketing cycle kicks in and the game's announced. So if a company announces a game, there's a good chance that they're going to be hiring roles.
All right, thank you, thank you. That's very informative. So, like, when the the game is going live, for instance, is when the new entry level positions are opening up, and some companies have that sort of built-in cycle that's predictable each year. Awesome. Um, I guess next going on, I guess just take a look at the time real quick. Um, how about so as you're a hiring manager, or whatnot, you must be looking at a bunch of applications and resumes. Um, how do you go through and evaluate one resume over another, sort of like a hierarchy? Do you, if you had two equally qualified individuals for a position, what would sort of be the hierarchy of deciding to go with one over the other? I know that's probably specific to each like team and field, but just as a general rule of thumb.
I would say that the job description is always a big template. I think
Mm,
a lot of companies like you take the job description, you take the resume, and you kind of look at them side to side and see how that goes. In another sense, it could also be sometimes, for example, on a website they might say, junior game designer, but that could mean a junior game designer on two different teams. So you could be having a stack of candidates that are a priority for that, and then a stack of candidates that are a priority for that. So it just kind of depends on how many recruiters are handling how many candidates, right? In my case, I handle everything. So if I do have two roles, I'm going to have two different stacks and two different sets of priorities for those different teams.
Yeah, I would again definitely echo Maria right there. Every single team and every single role has its own priority, and they're looking for sometimes very different things, right? And so sometimes what makes it a little bit hard for us as a recruiter is, I may have 5 different roles on my plate at any given time. I'm looking for a gameplay engineer, while at the same time looking for a data engineer, while at the same time looking for a business development intern. All 3 things are looking for very different things. And as Maria said, the job description is your roadmap. So if you were an engineer, you probably shouldn't apply to an artist role just because you had this deep, deep, dark dream of wanting to become an artist, right? Make sure you're applying to the role that is most relevant to your skill, and let that be your doorway in. If you want to be an artist later, sure, but use your skills as an engineer to get into the company you want to get into, and then begin developing those skills on the side and also developing the connections you need to eventually shift into that later on. And to answer your question about, let's take, for example, two candidates perfectly aligned and everything just looks the same and we don't know how to pick. I think the teams do a good job of assessing candidates via technical assessments or art assessments. And if that gives them a tie score, then it comes down to the cover letter as well. And we use that to kind of determine passion. So there's a couple of steps that we can take to try to differentiate one candidate from another. But I would say off the top of my head, that's probably what's most relevant now.
Thank you. That's awesome. So you were talking about the specifying for different teams and whatnot, and then using the cover letter and sort of using the job description as a rubric for the assessing the resumes, which is fascinating. So this is sort of mirroring what we were talking about with the doing all that research makes your job much easier in using the assessing each of these applications because it seems like it's very difficult to go through so many different applications and judge them. So what it seems like an applicant can do to help you guys assess whether you'd be a good fit for the position is doing as much research as possible into that position and those job qualifications to make sure that they line up, and then the assessment is much easier for you.
Mhm.
Alrighty. So for our next question, you're actually talking about having a career where you start in one position and being very specific and being very focused for that position, and then being able to transition from that position to other departments, like from going from engineering and programming over to art. How much like horizontal mobility do you think there would be in the game industry, or at least in your companies that you're at now?
I think there's quite a bit. I mean, I can't speak for every company, of course, but at least in the case of a small company like Unbroken Studios, we do tend to wear a lot of hats because there are just so few of us. So that gives a lot of opportunity for trying new things and moving into other disciplines, or at least kind of having a hybrid role. So yeah, I definitely think there's quite a few opportunities.
Thank you. And also even considering that, is there opportunities from industries outside of the games industry for being hired on? What would you say are other industries that have like adjacent or transitional skill sets that you would hire from?
There's so many. I mean, I have friends who worked at um, biological labs where they model like um, the way that bacteria does stuff. And then I have friends that got into the industry from being dancers for the Ubisoft Just Dance team. So there are literally so many pathways that I don't think that a specific group is.
Yeah, yeah. I guess then is there any people that you've hired from outside of the games industry for a specific role? Or have you transitioned in your personal career path from an industry outside of the games industry?
I can chime in a little bit here as I actually didn't start off in the game industry. I was at a startup tech company, which was just a very different environment. So I think I can be a prime example that you don't have to start off in the game industry to end up there. I think as long as you have, a passion for, providing the best experience to the players and for the company and what they're doing, I think that's one of the biggest things that, any company would be looking for when they are hiring. And of course, just making sure you have the relevant experience. I think one great thing is always a new perspective. So outside industries are always welcome because and with a fresh set of eyes and can maybe bring in fresh new ideas as well.
Awesome, thank you.
I interviewed a woman once who worked at the Pentagon, and she was trying to transition into a narrative design role, and it was absolutely the thrill of my life.
That's awesome. That's so sick. So it sounds like as long as you're focused and you have skills that transition well for that particular role, it's you can be from anywhere.
Yeah, yeah, Absolutely. You don't have to have been in the gaming industry. I've definitely had the same experience as Maria, right? I've definitely looked at candidates and saw candidates from the finance industry to do something that's not finance related at all. I've seen people work in production who somehow in their secret path was a software engineer, right? You see people who have a master's in sociology, and I was a sociology major. So of course, when I graduated college with that, I thought, I can't do anything with this, right? Unless I get a PhD in it, like who's going to hire me with the sociology? I see them become data scientists because they had a very deep interest in consumer behavior and player behavior, right? So you can come from anywhere. It really just comes down to, are you willing to put in the work necessary to get that role you want, right? And there's always a possibility out there. As long as you're still breathing, I definitely think there's room for you in the gaming industry. It's just a matter of, are you willing to put in the work to get there?
Sounds good. Thank you, everybody. I think one of the skills that helps really well to make that sort of connection, and also to tie it in with other applicants that might not be thinking about doing this journey, is that soft skills like communication, teamwork, and leadership are really important in the games industry due to its team-based nature, and be applicable to all sorts of applicants, even for engineering and whatnot. But how would you list that? Oh, Maria down.
Oh, no.
One second.
Oh no.
Maria, do we have you? Ah. I'll just finish my thought there and then wait for her to reconnect. But how would you list out on your resume soft skills like that in an effective manner? Uh, uh Maria, all right, can you hear us?
Sorry about that. I was muted.
Oh no, it's all right. It's all right. Um, what I was saying is that soft skills such as communication, leadership, and teamwork are really important in the games industry due to its team-based nature, collaborating with other people from across departments. But how would you list that on your resume from experiences that you've had in a way that's easily readable for recruiters and effective?
I think the most important thing would be to convey how many people you worked with and exactly what you were responsible for. It can be tempting to say, we did this, we worked on this, but what's most important during the interview or during the application is what your contribution was.
That makes sense. So sort of picking out what your role was in that project, and also listing out how many people that you had to work with to accomplish that, kind of gets across that I did this, but it was with a whole bunch of people, sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think to add on to that, when you're a student and you're working on these various gaming projects, you don't have to be the executive producer or director of the team to have, to be the quote unquote great communicator on the team, right? A designer or an engineer also needs to communicate. And I understand that in order to have an effective resume, we have to list all our skills. Um, I say limit the communication piece because you can demonstrate that during the interview or on your various GitHub pages or your game development pages as you list out what role you had on the team. And because the reason why I say that is because I want you to use your resume to really highlight the technical skills that you have. A lot of times we can differentiate a person who can communicate versus someone who perhaps can't, at least not in the manner that's necessary during an interview, during the actual interview process. And so try to showcase your teamwork ability, your leadership ability in your portfolio with the various projects that you have worked on. And you can definitely list out strong communicator, great leadership, but utilize your cover letter to really talk about that, because again, the cover letter is your chance to tell us who you are holistically as a person, whereas the resume is more so almost that checklist of what you can bring to the table and the value you can bring to the team.
That sounds good. That actually leads in pretty well. I was wondering, what specific questions can you ask during an interview to communicate these soft skills and also your interest in it? And what are you as recruiters looking for in the interview to uh, for those qualifications?
So
Um,
oh, go ahead, Maria. Sorry.
One thing I would say is I would always ask the size of the team that you're going to be working with. because that can vary in a great way. And also kind of the composition of that team. Are you working in a discipline team or are you working in a cross-functional team? That has a really big impact on the kind of work that you do and the kind of, I guess, the environment that you'd be in.
That's actually interesting. I'm not familiar with those terms of disciplined and cross-functional. Do you mind elaborating on that?
Yeah, so a discipline team would be a team that is composed all of the people that do the same kind of task. So all animators or all artists. And then a cross-functional team is a team comprised of different disciplines. That could be a designer, an engineer, an artist, all coming together, typically to work on a specific feature or part of the game, so things like that.
Sounds good. Thank you very much. Oh, sorry. Do you have any other input on questions to ask during an interview, Hector and Marissa?
Yeah, I
I
think
think
Maria hit the nail on the head there. I mean, I couldn't have said it any better.
All right. Wonderful. Thank you. You guys have been great guests. We've gotten to halfway through this panel here, so I'm going to transition over to asking questions that are actually from our Discord and from our audience in the Twitch chat. For our first question, let me read it off here. So, if, say, I see a job where I meet all the qualifications except must have X to Y years of experience and or already shipped an indie/mobile/AAA title, is it still worth applying? What are your thoughts on experience requirements for job openings? Uh, there we are. So
I
what
think
is, yeah, go for it. Sorry.
I think just depending on how many years of experience they're looking for should determine if you should still apply. If they're looking for somebody who has 5 to 7 years of previous experience, and you have maybe 1 to 2 years of experience, I would probably pause and hold off and wait until you have a little bit more experience. But if you're right on the cusp, I would definitely say still go for it, still apply. The worst thing that can happen is they say no. But sometimes depending on your experience, it can put you ahead of some other candidates who maybe even have a couple more years under their belt.
Agreed.
Sounds good. I also
Yeah.
feel like people undervalue how many years of experience they have because they're not counting, say, being in school. How would you, as recruiters, count like making games in clubs in school? Would you count that as like years of experience in game development?
To me, it's difficult to say because it's not really an equation, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's like going to the gym. You get out of it what you put into it. So, uh, I don't have an answer for that one, I guess.
Sounds good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that definitely is a little bit of a tough one because context really matters. If you're if you're 21, you just graduated college and you apply to a job that's asking for 10 years of experience in a thing, you
Yeah, yeah,
probably
yeah.
don't have that experience, right?
Yeah.
But if you're going for let's say an associate software engineer role at Blizzard specifically, they may be asking for 1 to 3 years or 1 to 2 years of a specific thing. And yeah, as a recruiter, we may see that, and we're going to say, contextually, we get it. You're a newly graduated student. You're going for kind of this lower associate entry level role. Yeah, I get it. You probably don't have 20 years of experience behind you, but we're going to count your internships. We're going to count the projects you worked on. We're going to count the stuff you did in class, right? And of course, if you are amazing at and have a very high technical ability to do what we need you to do, of course we'll consider you, right? But at the same time, candidates should also be wary of some companies who say, you know, um, must have 10 years of Kubernetes experience, right? And for those people who are unfamiliar with Kubernetes,
Been
it was invented
around.
by Google. Yeah, it's a cluster management software, open source coding language, right? But that was just invented 5 years ago. So how can anyone have 10 years of experience in it? So, so you have to also keep a lookout for that as a student and also as a young professional. Make sure that what the companies are asking for is actually relevant to you and that is actually reasonable as well. Because when I was job searching, there's definitely been a few companies who asked for very unreasonable requirements. But keep in mind that for most of us, the gaming industry being so niche and being pretty small as it is, what we put on our job descriptions is actually a very good estimate of what you can expect on the job and what can you expect in terms of skill sets you need to bring.
Sounds good. Thank you. I'll roll up our next question then from the Discord. To quote here, also, I've had lots of experiences where I applied to tons of studios and companies. I hear nothing, and then 5 months later, get a simple rejection email. I am never given a chance to talk to anyone. I know jobs and games can be very competitive. What are the best ways to be seen and break out of this silence then rejection? I actually getting myself in front of a person. Now, I've also understand that this might be an interesting topic of that sort of getting your foot in the door aspect of being hired and recruited. What is your perspective on this as recruiters yourselves?
Say that one of the things, for one, there is the aspect of scale to be considered. So 2 years ago, Hector and I both did this panel, and he dropped a number that absolutely blew my mind
Was it the
about
intern count, that portion?
Yeah.
yes, about their summer intern program and how Hector, how many people was it that you looked at, or your team looked at for the summer internship program that year, if you
Yeah, I think
remember?
yeah, it was like 32,000 for, and that year I think we hired like 93 interns, something like 32,000 applications.
Boy.
That scale it blew my mind. Now, while I don't work on that scale, my scale is still pretty large. An entry-level position will tend to get around 300 to 500 applicants over the course of a month. And if the role's still open by that time, you really those numbers really stack up. So that's one thing to know is that just because you've been rejected, it doesn't mean that you're terrible and you don't qualify and everything's awful. It just could mean that there's just a lot of people and maybe you just don't happen to be in that top level of meeting qualifications that are needed for the role. That being said, I think a really great way to combat that is just to network, is to get in front of people. So, like this particular event previously was held in person, and Hector, myself, and the other recruiters would be there, and we would be able to speak to you and get to know you. And that's how I've met a lot of students who I've eventually kind of brought on and hired. And so that's a really great way of doing it, getting to know, contacting people on LinkedIn, saying, hey, I just dropped my application for this role that I noticed that you posted on LinkedIn. I just really want to say that I'm really super excited, and here's some things about me that are a good fit for the role. Hope you have a great weekend. It doesn't have to be complicated. It's just a really great way of connecting with people, because sometimes those people aren't recruiters. So sometimes, let's say, for example, the hiring manager for the role, so that would be like your future boss in that job, will post this job on LinkedIn, and they'll say, hey, I'm hiring for my team. And then you message that person. You say, hey, future potential manager, I saw in the job description that you need this, and this. Here's my resume. Here's those three things, examples of how I've done those three things in the past. Either way, hope to hear from you. Take care. And that's a really great way of connecting with people.
Sounds good. How is the perspective at, say, like a much larger studio such as Blizzard?
I would say the channels to connect with us, it's kind of the same as Maria's, right? You go to career fairs, you try to link up with us on LinkedIn. And yeah, I get it. There are days where I might receive 100 invites to be added on LinkedIn, and I will probably add everybody that's not trying to sell me something. Trust
Yeah.
me, we get a lot of those as well. Um, and I'll probably get 100 messages as well. And so even though we do our best to try to reply to everyone on LinkedIn, at least that's a channel for you to connect with us and kind of see our updates as we post them, right? But I think a lot of people put too much focus on just the recruiters and forget about the people on the teams. For example, let's take being an artist, right? Natively, most of our Blizzard artists live on ArtStation, on artstation.com. Many of you students and those listening who are artists or designers, you probably are familiar with that. Well, a lot of our artists are on there, and they proactively are always looking for either really good candidates, or they're just reviewing work for fun, because that's what you do on ArtStation. You look at other people's work, you give each other feedback. So you want to make sure you keep those channels open to various folks within a team, within a specific company as well, not just on the recruiter. Because even if you, let's say, know us, let's say Maria wants a job at Blizzard, gives me her resume, the best I can do is really just forward it on, right? Because it's not my call to hire someone. It's really the hiring team's call. And you still have to do the whole interview loop anyway. And if the team is giving you a test, you have to take the test anyway. So just because you know me and because I can afford it to, isn't necessarily a drop in the bucket in getting that job, right? There's still the rest of it is still up to you and what you can bring to the table.
Sounds good. Very well put. Thank you. Thank you. Um, in the interest of time, I'll move on to our next question now. Also taken from the Discord, and I'm quoting here. I applied for a few jobs, but I've heard that cover letters are somewhat more personal in the games industry. Oh, what kind of information would you like to see in cover letters? It seems like we've covered this one pretty well before, but is there any last tidbits that you'd like to put for the folks in the audience about cover letters?
I don't think there's any really new information, that we could discuss, but just a reminder, this is a chance to really show them who you are. Don't be afraid to talk about what games you're playing. Don't be afraid to talk about your interests and your passions and why you're interested in specifically applying for this position in this team. So just making sure you check off all of the boxes as far as, what they're looking for. And that's ultimately what will set you up for success when writing that cover letter.
Sounds good. Thank you. I'll move to the Twitch chat now for questions, and we actually have a pretty good one here that's fairly specific. A person is asking if there is any ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act accommodations for people looking for jobs, and also specifically for like those soft skills with communication and whatnot that can be very core to an application. Um, does there do recruiters have that sort of help with that sort of aspect of it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say that if the accommodation is definitely within reason for the company, where it's not something that's way out of the ordinary to where we've just never, if it doesn't cost us like $1 million to do it, yeah, of course, right? And I don't think any gaming company out there will ever discriminate on a candidate who is in a wheelchair or maybe speaks in Braille, right? And so, yeah, absolutely. Again, I think the qualifier is definitely within reason, and usually HR would have to be involved, not just the recruiter.
Wonderful, thank you. That's good input and really impactful for a lot of people. I'm also interested in you're talking about this like huge scale of going through applications and also how you guys network as recruiters and whatnot. I'm actually interested, and folks are asking in the Twitch chat, what does your day to day look like churning through all of these and also attending these events? What's your week by week work schedule sort of feel like?
I think it's safe to say for a lot of us that the day changes every single day. There's not a consistent schedule that you'll see in a recruiter life. But typically, for the most part, throughout the week, we're going through our positions, reviewing resumes, looking at cover letters, sending those to our hiring managers, and then just staying in the loop for our candidates who are already in the process interviewing. Making sure that they feel prepared for their interview, understand what's ahead, and then from a networking aspect. Just being engaged on LinkedIn, I think every day I usually spend about maybe 25 to 35 minutes just trying to go through my inbox, respond to messages where I can, accept invitations. And then from an event perspective, we're always on the lookout for new events. So if there's something that I've attended in the past, usually it'll come up on my radar again the same time next year. Or if somebody's just reaching out on LinkedIn about new events, it's always, welcomed.
Nice. What is your sort of work schedule? Is it similar to Marissa's, Maria and Hector?
Yeah, I think so. And in the case of being a small studio, and like I said, everyone kind of wears quite a few hats. In my case, in addition to handling recruiting and HR, I do still touch a little bit on operations, admin. I have to run payroll, things like that. People have to get paid. And but that also means I get to interface with a lot of people on a daily basis. So, in the morning, I'll come in, I'll take care of emails, I'll kind of prep for the day. But then perhaps my boss, the CEO, will come in at before lunch, like 11, say, hey, we've got a new role to open. And So now I know after lunch, I'm going to prep that job description. I'm going to get it posted. I'm going to get it approved by the person the hiring manager, things like that. So it all kind of depends on what walks into my door that day.
Yeah, I'll definitely echo that. It could be so varied, right? And usually when we're in season, speaking specific about interns, us as recruiters on the intern side, it's a little bit different, right? We're not doing full cycle. And for those who are unfamiliar with what the term full cycle means in recruiting, it's that you source the candidate, and that's our term for essentially finding you, whether you applied or we find you on LinkedIn, all the way to us giving you the offer until you onboarding. So you're literally doing the full cycle. We mainly do this in chunks. So typically in the fall, we're kind of in recruiting phase, right? And then we bring you on. And then in the summer, we run the program. And then post summer, we start preparing for the new class. And then later in the fall, of course, we're going to all of these recruitment events. So our year is kind of broken up into these four big chunks on the recruitment side. But if you're talking about mainly as a young adult or someone just trying to get in as a true professional, yeah, I would say full cycle is definitely quite the animal because the first thing you do when you get in the office is, of course, maybe check emails, check your voicemail, you process anything you have to process. You're meeting with hiring teams to do kickoff meetings to see what they're looking for and what types of candidate profiles they're looking for. And then you get back to your desk, you got to open that requisition while continuing sourcing and filling, the 10 other roles that you have on your plate. So that's kind of how, in general, the day to day as a recruiter pretty much looks like. It's constant communication. There's usually a lot of meetings interspersed in between, and of course, you got to find time for yourself to, play a little games here and there too, because you are working at a game company, so you got to make sure you
Yeah,
have some fun.
of course, of course. Thank you so much for giving your insights into your schedules and whatnot. Um, for our last question here from the Twitch chat, I'd like to touch on something that's very pertinent right now. Is do you foresee any sort of shift in the hiring cycle, specifically due to our current pandemic events going on right now? For say, you're releasing new opportunities in the fall for Blizzard or at Unbroken Studios, and what should entry level applicants be looking forward to have changed due to these circumstances?
I think in the case of Unbroken Studios, we had a bit of a bottleneck when it came to our capacity to onboard people. So it wasn't that we didn't want to hire someone. It was that, oh, we have to get this person a computer, we have to get this person VPN, we have to get this person paperwork remotely, and they have to connect with everybody they need to. So what when this all kind of came to be and we all moved remotely, we were hindered by our ability to onboard people. Since that point, the quantity of roles that we have to hire hasn't changed. It's just gone slower. So if anything, it kind of seems like there's more roles because it's just taking more time to kind of do everything.
That's interesting. So the logistics have started to slow down a bit,
Hmm.
but the opportunities are still there.
Yeah, and actually on top of that, even getting a computer is difficult with suppliers being unavailable, and so even simple things like that can really hinder our capacity to onboard new people.
Yeah, shipping's got a lot slower.
Mhm.
How are things over at Blizzard though?
I would actually say that, it sounds like it's very similar to what Maria's experiencing. Blizzard still has the need to hire all of these individuals to help, build the future. But when it comes to a logistical standpoint, certain teams are just better equipped to work from home from others. So for teams that, they already have, an onboarding program set in place and it's easy to get them set up, those roles will be filled a little bit faster than maybe some of our more specific roles that are going to take a little bit more time to just kind of iron out all the details and make sure that they have that successful transition. But at the end of the day, I think we're all in a good position where we're still actively hiring. It's just going to take a little bit of patience from our candidates, though, as we kind of navigate this new territory.
Yeah, no,
Awesome.
I would totally echo that as well. I mean, and one quick example of some teams that may have a little bit of difficulty is especially if you're on a game team, right? If you are an engineer that has to either build a specific tool, or if you have a need to actually deploy the entire client in order to demo or test something, but you have to do it via VPN, that's going to be very difficult, right? Because you're talking about a lot of bandwidth. You're talking about a system that's still left at work, and the machine you have at home probably isn't a $4,000 system. I'm just throwing out a random number there that you might have at work. And so I would definitely say that there are difficulties with stuff like that. But if you are a web developer or someone who doesn't have to deploy anything major or heavy onto your own system while remoting into your local machine at work, yeah, I definitely think that's fine. But yeah, I think, yeah, overall, Blizzard is still hiring. I think majority of the gaming companies are. I think one thing to keep in mind at the same time is that we are seeing a lot of our startups and major tech organizations shuttering their doors. And so all of a sudden, you're seeing a huge mass of software engineers that used to work at Uber or Tesla or Grubhub, right? They're all of a sudden available and they're looking for a job. And so, with many companies going on hiring freezes, you're seeing a lot of them who have the ability and who've always had a vested interest in joining gaming start applying. And so it will be a little bit tougher, I think, just to be completely honest and transparent for a lot of new students right now. But at the same time, always tip your name into the hat because you will never know. And of course, do everything you can to build your resume cover letter around what the job description is saying. Make those connections as best you can, and let's just see what happens.
Thank you. Thank you. This has been incredibly insightful, and I'm glad that you all came out here. But I think that's actually all the time that we have for this panel. Um, I'd like to give you one last warm thank you for all coming out and answering my questions and answering the questions from the Discord and Twitch. And uh, have a wonderful Student Game Festival 2020. If you have any like last words of wisdom, uh, speak your piece. Anything before we sign off?
I hope everyone is cooking lots of delicious things and staying healthy and staying inside.
Thank you.
Yeah, hustle. You'll be okay. You'll be okay. I graduated in 2009. The market crashed in '08, and I turned out okay. So everyone will be okay. Just stay home and stay healthy, eat well. And if gaming is where you want to be, if Blizzard is where you want to be, if Riot is where you want to be, put in the work and give it a couple of years, and you'll be there. Could be 5 years, could be 10 years, but if you hustle, you'll get there.
Thank you so much. This has been a wonderful panel. It's been great to have you guys.
Thank you.
Right,
Yeah.
thank
Thanks.
you.
It was a pleasure.